My fellow Canadians, today I stand before you joined by hundreds of many Canadian Muslim leaders from across the country. We come here today because today is the 7th anniversary of the Quebec Mosque massacre. Just last week, we heard the sentencing arguments for the London terror attacker who took the lives of 3 generations of families in London, Ontario. We remember their names: Khaled Belkacemi, Azzedine Soufiane, Abu Bakr Thabi, Mamadou Tamouberi, Ibrahima Berry, Abdelkrim Hassan, Mohamed Azim Zafis, Talat Afzal, Yumna Afzal, Salman Afzal, Madiha Salman. There's a simple truth that brings us here today, is that Canada has suffered more mass killings motivated by Islamophobia in the past 7 years than any other country in the G7. We come today representing the leadership of our community, doctors, lawyers, progressive supporters, imams, writers, entertainers, entrepreneurs, moms and dads, and everybody in between, because we believe in Canada. We believe in each other, and we believe that our fellow Canadians have always had our back. Canadians have always been consistent in their commitment to a just society. Because that's what being Canadian is all about. Being tough but fair, it's about courage, it's about integrity. We're proud Canadian identities and proud to have deep roots in this country. My own ancestors came to Canada through the Underground Railroad. Fleeing the horrific institution of slavery in the United States, we followed the North Star to come here to find freedom. As Canadians, we continue to stand with integrity, and that's why we've spent the day engaging with members of all parties, and we continue to have a number of important meetings set for this afternoon. However, today, we, representing the vast majority of the Canadian Muslim leadership from coast to coast, have officially canceled our meeting with the Prime Minister. At this moment, we no longer think it's productive to speak with this Prime Minister. As community leaders, we will continue to engage elected officials across the country. This is an unprecedented step for us. We've always engaged with our government and in our democratic process, and always agreed to meet and engage precisely because this Prime Minister came to us with great promise and did deliver on select things that Canadians had asked for, to reverse a dark time of division after 2015. However, that great promise now feels broken and perhaps beyond repair. As we stand here today, our government has consistently noted that it believes in multilateral institutions like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court of Justice. Yet that hasn't stopped Canada from refusing to take any accountability in responding to the provisional measures and ignoring international law by refusing to take seriously any of what the ICJ ordered as provisional measures. Instead, they've compromised the integrity of the international rule-based order and the ICJ by challenging the premise of the case. When our government says that we take international law and the slaughter of thousands of children seriously, we think Canadians will agree. This government doesn't anymore. But it's not only that. As we stand here today, our government has failed to move on substantive hate crime legislation. We stand here today, the government has failed on its promise to institute a victim of hate support fund that would have supported victims like the survivors of the Quebec City mosque massacre. As we stand here today, mosques continue to be targeted across the country in an unprecedented spike of Islamophobia. The words flow effortlessly every time there is a new attack, a new hate crime. Politicians have learned the script. They're shocked, they offer condemnation, they offer their support and say this can't happen again. But it does. It happens again and again, and we hear the same words again. And as much as this inaction has disappointed us in the past, and trust us, even simple asks like performing the security infrastructure program haven't become fulfilled. Over the last 3 months, we've heard our government offer justification and cover for the killing of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza. We've watched as they stood quietly by while journalists were targeted and killed. We've seen members of this government justify the targeting of hospitals and schools where thousands have been taken shelter. We've seen the feminist foreign policy Canada so proudly speaks about becoming silent in the face of women and girls who've been slaughtered by the thousands. We've seen the government that stood strongly in support of the the right of Afghan girls to go to school. Forget that children in Gaza deserve the same right to an education too. There's almost no mosque left in Canada where there is not any congregant who hasn't lost a member of their family in Gaza. The Prime Minister yet has not specifically condemned any attack on any mosque or Muslim person in Canada in the last few months, despite us repeatedly raising those attacks with the Prime Minister's office. A Calgarian, a journalist, a graduate from Queen's University, was apparently kidnapped by the Israeli state agents over the weekend. Our Prime Minister has said nothing to protect the safety of Canadian citizens. of this Canadian citizen. Apparently a Canadian is not a Canadian, is not a Canadian. And that's why we're here today. We don't have much to say to the Prime Minister now. We've met the Prime Minister when he came to Quebec City Mosque in 2017 and said that there would be action. We met the Prime Minister when he came to London in 2021 after the massacre and said that there would be action. We hear from our constituents, representing millions of Canadian Muslims, that it has become clear that what we seem to only get a sliver of policy reform when our lives or our safety is destroyed. Poll after poll has shown that the majority of Canadians want to see action to call for peace in Gaza, and they want to see serious policy action on us standing up for just human rights causes, because this is who we are as a nation that stands up for peace and justice for all people, whether Palestinian or Israeli or any other race or nationality. Yet the Prime Minister appears to simply not be interested in the will of Canadians. This has unfortunately been the progress of years and months of a clear pattern where the Prime Minister has demonstrated that he is no longer interested in listening to the interests of our community. This is a tragic decay in our relationship from a leader that we welcomed into our houses and our hearts as he welcomed refugees and talked about sunnier ways. Members of our community were literally naming their children after the Prime Minister, and yet it has come to this. Because of the decision of the Prime Minister to discard our global reputation as a humanitarian country and a peacemaking nation. As Canadian poet Mark Strand wrote, "We have discarded dreams, preferring the heavy industry of each other. And we have welcomed grief and called the ruin impossible a habit to break. And now here we are." When the leadership of this government refuses to take stances that support the life and liberty of its citizens, the leadership of this government loses the ability to raise the flag of sympathy later when the next Islamophobic attack inevitably occurs. We will continue to meet with our other elected officials and elected representatives today to advocate and engage in good faith. And we are here to remind our leaders that for Canadians, this is not emotion or anger or frustration. This is what we as a democracy do when our family members are killed here or abroad and our government does nothing. We'll always be there to engage in good faith to try to champion the cause of justice. As Canadian Muslims, we believe that this is the right thing to do for the tens of thousands of children of Gaza, for those lost to Islamophobia here in Canada, for all of them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nuzhat Jaffrey, and I'm here today from the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. This is a profoundly sad day for all of us as we commemorate the victims and survivors of the Quebec City mosque massacre. Since that attack, we thought we were making strides in addressing Islamophobia in this country. On October 7th, all that changed. Since then, we are alarmed at the rise of Islamophobic attacks on Muslim women and girls, particularly those who are visible and identifiable by their attire. Women and children are living in fear, and our civil liberties are being violated as we speak for the women and children of Gaza. We are seeing the slaughter of thousands, tens of thousands of women and children. I recall the image of a little boy, Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi, lying on the beach in Turkey during the war in Syria. I remember how it mobilized Canadians and the incoming government to take action, to take decisive action, to bring thousands of Syrian refugees into Canada with pride. And yet, why is it that this government and fellow Canadians, unfortunately, are not moved by the slaughter of a child every 10 to 15 minutes in Gaza? And what about the slaughter of more than 7,500 women bearing their babies in their wombs and being killed? Women who cannot have anesthesia for C-sections. As a women's organization, we are appalled that we are seeing this happen before our very eyes, and yet there is no action with respect to stopping the slaughter, stopping the genocide. So, we wonder how any person of conscience could support the slaughter and how members of any government or political party or leadership can sleep at night. We cannot sleep at night thinking about the women and children of Gaza. How can we observe the slaughter, the maimed bodies, child amputees, and no food, no water, no electricity, incommunicable because they cannot have access to communications? We have many members of our organization who happen to be of Palestinian origin, who have family there. They cannot connect with them. So this is a lived reality for us. We are either 1 or 2 degrees of separation from people we know, families we know, where someone has been killed, either in the occupied West Bank, in the occupied territories, as well as Gaza. This is unacceptable. And the saddest thing about it is that I cannot imagine anyone devaluing human life to this extent. Where is our humanity? What are we thinking? What's happened to us? The sad thing is that Palestinian lives actually do not matter. However, we believe that Palestinian lives also matter. And the dehumanization of those lives has caused us, in this country, some of us, to turn our back on humanity. What we are asking for is that we would really like to see the Government of Canada do all it can to ensure that the provisional measures in the decision of the ICJ that have been recommended must be followed so that the slaughter can stop now. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bonjour, je m'appelle Mohamed Labidi, je suis le président du Centre culturel islamique de Québec actuellement. J'étais le vice-président du Centre culturel islamique de Québec et de la Grande Mosquée de Québec lors de la tragédie. Et je suis devenu président quelques mois après. Et j'ai vécu la tragédie du jour J jusqu'à maintenant. Collectivement, chaque année, nous prenons un moment pour réfléchir, non seulement sur les événements de ce jour-là, mais aussi sur la question plus générale de l'islamophobie. Le 29 janvier 2017 a été une journée horrifiante, très dure pour notre communauté. Mais les faits dont on parle trop peu ont eu lieu les semaines et les mois qui l'ont précédé. Et même qui l'ont suivi parce que l'islamophobie a continué malgré qu'il y avait 6 victimes et autant de blessés et plusieurs rescapés. Les fidèles de la mosquée nous ont rapporté des paroles dégoûtantes, du vandalisme et des comportements violents dirigés contre notre communauté. Cependant, la plus grande menace qui est régnée demeurait l'atmosphère d'impunité. Des personnes haineuses se sentaient libres de nous attaquer. Nos vies étaient considérées comme bon marché et sans importance. Ce qui me met en colère aujourd'hui, c'est que nous vivons à nouveau dans cette atmosphère et dans cet environnement. Et ce sont nos dirigeants qui ont permis à cette atmosphère de se rétablir actuellement. Le déclenchement de la guerre au Moyen-Orient le 7 octobre a profondément affecté notre communauté. Nous avons entendu des déclarations problématiques les unes après les autres, provenant de divers échelons du gouvernement. Une fois de plus, comme pendant la période avant ce jour fatidique, nos vies semblent bon marché, alors que nous regardons des milliers de Palestiniens se font massacrer et que l'islamophobie nous menace à ce jour ici au Canada. Aujourd'hui, je veux m'adresser directement à la communauté politique canadienne. Mesdames, Messieurs, vos paroles ont des conséquences. Le Premier ministre du Québec, il l'a dit, les mots peuvent tuer. Appeler à un cessez-le-feu permanent à Gaza et poser des actions concrètes en termes de lutte contre l'islamophobie pour que la tragédie du 29 janvier 2017 ne se reproduise plus. Agissez avec la justice et appelez à la paix, s'il vous plaît. Agissez maintenant. Merci beaucoup.
We'll now take questions.
J'avais une question par rapport à la décision du gouvernement Trudeau de suspendre le financement à UNRWA, UNRWA. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de cette décision?
C'est sûr que c'est malheureux. Récemment, ça fait une semaine que je retourne de la Palestine. C'est important de comprendre que le UNRWA et les fonds et les services que le UNRWA offre sont littéralement sauvent des milliers de vies. Il y a des milliers, des centaines de milliers, sinon des millions de personnes qui dépendent des ressources, qui dépendent de tous les provisionnements que le UNRWA offre. Et si UNRWA n'est pas capable de subvenir à sa mission, il y a des vraies craintes qu'il va y avoir des personnes qui vont littéralement crever de faim. Le Gaza, maintenant, c'est une des places qui est le plus insécure au niveau de la nourriture. C'est vraiment une situation tragique. Alors, la question pour nous autres, c'est comment on va réussir à obtenir de l'aide pour le peuple palestinien qui vit un moment incroyablement difficile. Ouais.
En même temps, est-ce que vous comprenez l'hésitation du gouvernement Trudeau, étant donné que là, on commence à voir, entre des indications qu'il y aurait peut-être des gens de l'organisme qui étaient liés aux attaques du Hamas. Donc, comment... Est-ce que vous comprenez que c'est délicat? Est-ce que vous voyez ça comme une situation délicate? Comment vous voyez ça, vous?
La façon que je le vois, de un, le terrorisme, c'est toujours inacceptable. Mais quand nous autres, on a été en Cisjordanie, j'ai rencontré plusieurs personnes qui travaillent pour UNRWA. J'ai rencontré une Américaine qui travaille pour UNRWA en Jordanie. On a rencontré un Européen qui travaille. Alors, il y a des milliers, des dizaines de milliers qui travaillent pour UNRWA. Dans d'autres cas, où que l'aide internationale est absolument cruciale, exemple en Ukraine, quand il y a des scandales de certaines personnes qui font des choses abominables, on vise les personnes qui le font. Mais à la fin de la journée, si c'est UNRWA ou une autre organisation, pour nous autres, c'est pas vraiment l'important. L'important, c'est que en réalité, les personnes qui dépendent littéralement de leur vie pour avoir des provisionnements, il faut absolument qu'on réussisse à apporter l'aide à ces personnes. Ouais.
Et juste en terminant en français, qu'est-ce que vous répondez à Pierre Poilievre qui dit que c'est une organisation terroriste?
Moi, j'ai rencontré des personnes à UNRWA en Jordanie qui éduquaient des enfants. J'ai rencontré environ 25 enfants qui dépendent de UNRWA pour littéralement apprendre à lire et écrire. Il n'y a rien dans l'éducation des enfants qui constitue un acte terroriste. If there's bad apples, you deal with the bad apples. C'est des personnes ou des individus négatifs, tu fais face avec ces personnes-là. On ne punit pas des millions de personnes qui sont littéralement dans ces situations impossibles parce qu'il y a une douzaine ou deux douzaines ou une centaine de personnes, peu importe, qui font quelque chose de terrible. Tu punis les criminels, tu punis pas la population. Et de plus, je pense que c'est important, ça revient dans un pattern de ce qu'on voit pour le peuple palestinien. Pour une raison ou une autre, on comprend ici au Canada que quand une personne fait quelque chose, cette personne est responsable pour ses actions. Mais en Palestine, ce qu'on voit, c'est des actions punitives collectives. C'est pas juste que moi je suis puni parce que mon voisin a fait quelque chose de terrible.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah.
Can I ask you about the meeting that you canceled with the Prime Minister? What was the meeting supposed to be about? And did you just cancel it today?
We were actually supposed to meet the Prime Minister on multiple occasions, twice today. Right now there's over 200 Muslim leaders from across the country, from Halifax to Vancouver, that have come to the Hill to talk about the issues that we're facing. Right now, we have seen the largest spike in Islamophobia since we've been taking data on it. And what we've seen is that the situation overseas has a direct impact on the lives of people here. And we've met multiple times with the Prime Minister and his office, and we've explained these realities. And for many people in our community, what we saw with the government's position on the International Criminal Court of Justice and what seems like an unwillingness to take concrete action to stop this conflict that is not only killing an enormous amount of people overseas, but really negatively impacting our lives here in Canada, there's nothing new that we could say. We've said it all before. So the question is, when does it go from a conversation where you're trying to find mutually beneficial or a road forward where you can actually bring concrete results to real tangible problems that all of us in our communities and our families are facing? When do we just, at what point in time do you realize that you're just no longer being listened to? And this is really something that we talked about as a community with these hundreds of community leaders that were here in Ottawa today. And that was a decision that we really made in the last 24 hours.
Okay, so you had 2 meetings scheduled with the Prime Minister.
No, we had 1 meeting scheduled today, my apologies. Yeah,
Sorry, you had 1 meeting
yeah,
scheduled?
we had scheduled 1 meeting, my apologies, 1 meeting scheduled with the Prime Minister today. That's
Okay,
correct.
1 meeting scheduled, and you canceled within the last 24 hours.
We decided to make we decided late last night that after multiple engagements with different members of the Liberal Party, and really thinking about how do we as a community go forward, we really made the decision really recently that we felt that the meeting with the Prime Minister we were no longer in a position to be able to make positive progress on these issues.
And it sounds like, but I just want to make sure, it was the government's response to the interim ruling from the ICJ that sort of broke the camel's back.
That's correct. That was really the straw that broke the camel's back.
So what was in that response that you found was unacceptable, if we can use that word?
Well, we know that the government had previously voted for a ceasefire. And many people across the world, including in our community, were hoping that the ICJ would actually, in their provisional ruling, would ask for a ceasefire. But they didn't even go that far. What they really asked for, grosso modo, was we wanted Israel to take measures to prevent a genocide, not even going as far as a ceasefire. And when the Canadian government said that it not only doesn't agree with the fundamental charge of genocide originally, but not only that, basically says, did not call on Israel to actually respect the ruling, that for us was an indication that the government has no intention of actually holding Israel to account when international bodies render decisions that would force them to stop the war.
We'll now go to Zoom for questions. Dylan, 1 question, 1 follow-up.
Hi there, Dylan Robertson from the Canadian Press. Thanks for taking our questions today. I just wanted to clarify when you had communicated to the Prime Minister's office, I guess that would have been this morning, what response that you had, what kind of communication you had in the lead up to this decision last night when it comes to PMO specifically.
Well, we informed the Prime Minister's office in the last couple of hours. So we let them know late this morning that we intended on canceling the meeting. We have had communications with the Prime Minister's office. We explained what our reasoning was for the decision. We also explained that we really hope that the Prime Minister actually takes actions in order to, 1, very clearly prevent the continued escalation of Islamophobic attacks for Canadians here, and also to make sure that Canada is doing absolutely everything in its power to stop the war overseas. This game that we're playing of trying to find who's the good guy and who's the bad guy is costing thousands of lives. It's not about finding fault. It's about finding solutions to stop a war that is killing thousands of people and is really negatively impacting our own communities. Every mosque you go to, somebody has family that live right now in Gaza. People have family members that are dying. People are literally asking this government to do whatever they can to save the lives of their family members. That action needs to be taken seriously. There is no way out. We're not going to kill our way out of this conflict. This has been going for 3 generations. The international community needs to get serious about stopping the violence in the Middle East once and for all. And it starts when organizations or when international bodies like the ICJ make rulings that ask for a cessation of hostilities, or at the very least, to respect measures to prevent a genocide. Canada, as a country, we should support that.
And my follow-up, I'm just going to double it here. I'm wondering, when you said the game of finding fault, if you could just sort of specify, because I think I know what you're saying, but I don't want to connect those dots myself. And also, a separate question about UNRWA. The government is saying that it's going to channel aid for Palestinians through other organizations, and I just wanted to get your perspective on if that's possible and what impact it will have if that aid is coming through different groups.
Can you please ask your first question again? I don't think it was clear. I didn't catch it properly.
Yeah, I'm sorry to double barrel it here. You talked about the need to stop playing this game of trying to blame people about who's responsible, and I wasn't quite clear if you meant that this is about is Hamas worse than what Israel's doing, or what you were trying to get at, and I'm hoping you could just kind of spell it out a bit more.
Yeah. So whenever we're talking, every time that our community has talked about the need to call for a ceasefire, what we often see the response in the government is there's this game that we start playing, right? Is it Hamas's fault, right? Israel needs to defend itself, but the whole question of at what point in time does it become absolutely unacceptable to continue killing people, to solve a problem, an intractable problem? At what point in time do we decide that this has to stop? How many people is it going to take? 100,000 people, 200,000 people, 1 million people? I think it's also important to note that we've seen many leaders in the Israeli government who have literally made genocidal statements. And talking and trying to figure out who's at fault is delaying the inevitable action, it's delaying the action that's required, which is to stop the violence. We need to be focused on stopping the violence. We need a ceasefire now, and Canada needs to do everything in its power to ensure that the war and hostilities come to an end.
Xolili, one question, one follow-up.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I apologize if this has already been answered in French, or I may have misunderstood, but a question of clarity. This rejection of meetings, is this a one-off, or is this going to be an ongoing rejection of meetings with the Prime Minister?
This was a one-off. We have not, the decision to completely cut off communications with the government, that hasn't been made. As we said, we're going to continue to have meetings with members of all 3 parties today, throughout the day. But for us, we really need to start seeing tangible action, and we need to start taking this government. We need to start seeing this government taking matters of policy seriously. We need to see real policy changes that are going to actually impact the lives of our community before we can actually re-engage with this government and with this Prime Minister in what feels like an earnest way. In a productive way. Yeah.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. For a follow-up, there's been talk about dissent within the Liberal Party over the past week or so. Some MPs have highlighted that a disagreement among MPs in relation to the war on Gaza illustrates that the party is able to, hold room for these dissenting viewpoints. Does that move the needle for you at all when the government itself takes a very clear and specific line in relation to this issue?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? Just to make sure it's really clear.
Yeah, so the idea of individual MPs being free to dissent with the federal government's position on Israel and Gaza, does that move the needle at all when the federal government itself has its own clear line?
At the end of the day, what we're looking for is tangible policy change. That is what we're interested in. We're interested in the government taking real, tangible action to reduce Islamophobia in this country, taking real, tangible action to stop the hostilities in the Middle East. That's what we're interested in. internal party dynamics. Like, we're not here to comment internal party dynamics. What's most important is tangible policy change. Yeah.
Est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer en français pourquoi vous avez décidé d'annuler aujourd'hui votre rencontre avec le Premier ministre?
Mais la raison pour qu'on a décidé vraiment de l'annuler aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment des consultations à l'intérieur de la communauté musulmane. Il y a, comme je dis, il y a plus que 200 leaders de la communauté musulmane qui sont venus de tout le pays. Et c'est vraiment une décision qu'on a prise après des longues consultations avec notre communauté. Alors, c'est un sentiment vraiment de ras-le-bol de la communauté musulmane du Canada. Ouais.
Mais ras-le-bol pourquoi?
Mais ras-le-bol parce qu'il y a plusieurs personnes, pour les raisons que j'ai énoncées, il y a plusieurs fois que la communauté a contacté, a parlé avec le bureau du Premier ministre ou le gouvernement pour dire on a vraiment besoin de voir des actions concrètes, un, au niveau international, deux, au niveau du discours, et trois, pour prendre action pour protéger la communauté musulmane qui vit actuellement le plus haut taux d'islamophobie de l'histoire. Alors, oui, c'est bien qu'on entend quand on nous dit on est préoccupé par la situation, mais d'être préoccupé par la situation, c'est pas assez. Ce qu'on a vraiment besoin de voir, c'est des actions tangibles pour amener du changement.
Do you have a meeting scheduled with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre?
We have a lot of meetings scheduled. So we do have a meeting scheduled with Pierre Poilievre. That's correct.
So can you explain the thinking behind that? Because you have a leader of a party who has not called for a ceasefire, who has called on a terrorist organization, and who has adopted opinions about this conflict, which is starkly against yours. What's the thinking there?
Right now, Pierre Poilievre is not the Prime Minister of the country. He has opinions, but he is not in a position to actually make change. The Prime Minister is in a position to actually make change. So when we're going to be talking to Pierre Poilievre, we are going to be very clear about what the Muslim community feels is, which is a negative discourse that's getting worse and is negatively impacting us. But when we're talking to the government, that's a different story. The government can actually take action right now. And so we're most concerned with a crisis that's affecting our community now. Which goes back to the comments that I made before. As a community, we want to continue to engage the political class. This is not about cutting ourselves off from society. We're a part of society. We need to continue to engage with all political parties. But the fact of the matter is, when somebody has the power and the authority to make tangible change, and you've told that party multiple times that the rhetoric and the decisions that you're making are hurting us, and you don't see tangible change, at what point in time do you decide that that basically you're not being taken seriously? And that's really the reflection of the community at this point in time.
But they are the opposition party. They are leading in the polls, and they have views that would cause more destruction and would act in opposition to what you're trying to achieve. So I still don't understand how you cancel the meeting with the Prime Minister. Yes, I know he has power, but you're still holding meetings with a party that has not called for a ceasefire.
Well, that is one of the reasons why we intend to meet with them. Our goal is to explain what we are living through as a Muslim community, and encourage the leader of the opposition to change their rhetoric. This is January 29th. We can all remember a time where the rhetoric against the Muslim community was really bad, especially after the Quebec City massacre. And we want to make sure that all political parties, that all politicians, that all leaders of civil society understand that their words have consequences. But the fact of the matter is, we have met multiple times with the Prime Minister. We've expressed our sentiment. Now we're going to be, what we were going to tell the Prime Minister today was nothing new. Today, when we're going to be meeting with Pierre Poilievre, we're going to be expressing our concerns to him, and we also hope to see change from the Conservatives in their rhetoric and also their policy positions.
Is this your first meeting with Poilievre?
Well, we've as an organization and as a community had meetings with Pierre Poilievre before, but not since the decision on the ICJ.
Et c'était avec le Premier ministre, pas avec le bureau du Premier ministre que vous avez une rencontre prévue aujourd'hui?
C'est exact.
Okay. D'accord. Et c'était prévu quand? Ce matin?
Cet après-midi. Ouais.
À Ottawa.
Exactly.
By canceling this meeting, that you're giving up an opportunity to to raise important issues like stopping arms sales to Israel, blocking arms sales. Or, yeah.
We've raised these issues multiple times, right? So there should be Canada should not be sending material aid to any of the belligerent parties, not just Israel, any of the belligerent parties. There should be no weapons export. There should be no IDF recruitment happening in Canada. There are Canadian soldiers right now, there are Canadian citizens right now who are serving in the IDF inside Gaza that may be committing war crimes. All these concerns, right, need to be taken seriously by the government. So Canada needs to actually show that it is taking tangible steps to stop the killing. You can't be sending weapons over to an active war zone where people are trapped in the most densely populated place on earth, and then on one hand and on the other hand say that you're for peace and you want the killing to stop.
You're closing the door to making that argument if you're canceling your meeting with the PM.
Well, this is an argument that we've made multiple times. That's the point. So how many times do you make the argument? Right?
Jusqu'à quel point est-ce que c'est en lien avec l'islamophobie ou jusqu'à quel point est-ce que c'est par la réaction du Canada ou l'absence de réaction du Canada à la décision de la Cour internationale de justice de vendredi, comme vous annulez aujourd'hui parce que le Canada envoie des armes à Israël ou n'arrête pas d'envoyer des armes à Israël? Pourquoi exactement vous avez annulé la rencontre aujourd'hui? Est-ce que c'est pour plusieurs raisons ou pour une raison?
C'est plusieurs raisons. Alors, comme j'ai expliqué dans mes remarques, il y a plusieurs raisons, en fait. Dans plusieurs discussions que la communauté a eues avec le Premier ministre, et depuis le début, depuis le 7 octobre, on a eu plusieurs rencontres avec le Premier ministre, on a eu plusieurs rencontres avec le gouvernement. On a expliqué très clairement notre situation. On a expliqué exactement c'est quoi le niveau du discours qui nous nuit. On a fait nos demandes pour assurer que le Canada ne participe pas, que le Canada n'aide pas l'effort militaire en Israël. On a eu plusieurs demandes du gouvernement dans les derniers 100 jours. Et le fait, c'est que malheureusement, on est rendu à un point où on répète toujours les mêmes affaires, on demande toujours les mêmes affaires, on soulève toujours les mêmes préoccupations, mais à la fin de la journée, ce qu'on voit, et spécialement la communauté, c'est comme on dit en anglais, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. Ce qu'on a vu vraiment avec la réaction du Canada à la décision du tribunal, c'est finalement, on s'est dit, mais si on va continuellement demander, si on va continuellement retourner au gouvernement pour demander les mêmes choses encore et encore et encore, et ils ne nous écoutent pas, à quel point on perd notre temps.
Qu'est-ce que vous auriez voulu que le Canada... En fait, comment est-ce que vous auriez voulu que le Canada réagisse à la décision du tribunal?
Mais on peut regarder les alliés du Canada, exemple l'Allemagne. L'Allemagne a dit simplement qu'on respecte la décision du tribunal. Ça a été très simple de dire simplement on respecte la décision du tribunal. Vous ne pouvez pas d'un côté dire que voter pour un cessez-le-feu et sur l'autre côté, quand le ICJ actuellement dit qu'on devrait prendre des mesures pour réduire la souffrance, on n'est même pas capable de dire oui, on accepte la décision provisoire. C'est pas cohérent. Alors à quel point on retourne et on demande encore? Ouais.
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.